Okay, holy man. Now we're going to learn some Talmud, but first, I think a beer is in order. Okay, here we go.
Beer.
Here, beer.
Beer.
Today's Daf Yomi Talmud Shir is brought to you by Gold Star, the preferred beer drinker of Talmudists. The preferred Talmud of beer drinkers. Whatever. Remember to pour it on its side so you don't get like too much foam, unless you're in like a big rush. Then you're wasting the precious beer. There we go. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvaro. So, okay, here we go. Okay. We're learning about what an animal may go out with on the Sabbath. And it says here in the Holy Writings that, of course, if you have an animal, and you want to let him go out on Shabbos, I don't think you're leading him out, but it says right here in the Mishnah, which we'll get to momentarily. Chamor yotze b'mardat b'zman shekshura bo. A donkey may go out on the Sabbath with a saddlecloth that protects it from the cold when it is tied to the animal. Hey, Bugs, do you have a cigarette? No?
Okay, I imagine.
Oh. Do me a favor? Yeah. Could you get me a cigarette and an ashtray and a lighter? Okay, so if it's tied to the animal and then thank you very much, and there's no room for concern lest it fall. Because if the mardat, the saddlebag, were to fall, this would be a problem. He might want to put it back on, and thus he would be violating the Holy Shabbos. So, what about rams? Rams, yes. Zcharim yotzin levuvin. Rams may go out levuvim. Oh, thank you, Bugs. That's really nice of you. Bugs just gave me a lion. I mean, it's really Arya's lion. It's not Bugs' little light. So we're going to put the lion right here, just to remember of the Lion of Judah. So just because, learning Torah, you don't have to suffer, you might as well enjoy yourself while you're learning, right? But enjoy yourself responsibly, kids. First of all, you got to be over 18, and you have to have no other responsibilities at that time. And also, don't go one gulp over the line. If your head's spinning around, you went too far. Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, and a tiger. Here, we have the tiger right here. Ever see the tiger? Rawr, rawr, tiger. Okay. My mom caught me smoking on YouTube, and ooh. It's okay, I told her I'm not inhaling. I'm not, see? Not inhaling, see? Anyhow, so, Zcharim yotzim levuvin. Rams may go out levuvin. Rechelot and ewes. What about a ewe on the Sabbath? They may go out shchuzot, kvulot, and kavunot. These terms will be explained in the following next few minutes. Ha'izim yotzet tzrurot. She-goats may go out with their udders bound. Rabbi Yossi oser b'kulan chutz min rechelin ha'kavunot. Rabbi Yossi prohibits the animals from going out with all of these items, as he considers all of them burdens. It's burdensome from the animal, except for the ewes that are kavunot. I believe that was their udders bound. No. That was one of those things that we're going to understand in a moment. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Izim yotzot surot liyabesh. Rabbi Yehuda says that goats may go out on Shabbat with their udders bound to drive their milk supply and discontinue their lactation in order to facilitate conception. In that case, they are tied with a tight permanent knot, and there is no concern lest it fall in the public domain. However, avalo lechalev, but they may not go out with their udders bound to conserve their milk, as in that case they are bound loosely. Zuk the Heilige Gemara. Amar Shmuel, V'hu shekashor lo me'erev Shabbos. Shmuel said that as long as it's tied from before the onset of the Sabbath. Amar Rav Nachman, matnitin nami daika. Rav Nachman said the wording of our Mishnah is also precise in support of Shmuel's statement. Dikatani, ein achamor yotzeh b'mardat b'zman she'emek shoralo. It teaches later in the chapter that the donkey may not go out into the public domain on Shabbat with its saddlecloth when it is not tied to its back. Hechidami, how is this so? Let's say that it's a case where it's not tied to it at all. Pshita, this is obvious. It's obvious. Then Dilma Naflale V'ate Latuya. Then clearly, if it's not tied to its all, it might fall off, and you might come to bring it and carry it 4 cubits in the public domain, which is a violation of the Sabbath. So, ele lav she'ena kshura me'erev Shabbos miklal dereisha shekshura lo me'erev Shabbat shmamina. Rather, is it not referring to a case where the saddlecloth, he hasn't been drinking enough. Isn't it a case where the saddlecloth, the mardat, is presently tied to the animal, but it was not tied from the Sabbath Eve? So, by inference, conclude that from the first clause, meaning in our Mishnah, which permits the animal to go out with the saddlecloth, it's referring to a case where the saddlecloth was tied to the animal from the Sabbath Eve, before sunset. The Gemara conclude from it that is the correct understanding. Tanya nami hachi, chamor yotze b'mardat b'zman shekashor me'erev Shabbat. This is also taught in the Braita, that a donkey may go out on Shabbat with its saddlecloth when it was tied to the animal from the Sabbath Eve. V'lo ba'ukaf, but not with its saddle, af al pi shekashor lo me'erev Shabbat, even if the saddle had been tied to it from Erev Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, af ba'ukaf b'zman shekashor lo me'erev Shabbat. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says it can even go out with its saddle when it was tied to the animal from the Sabbath Eve, provided uvilvad shelo yikshor lo masrichan, provided that it does not tie the strap. Gasroch is the same root word. A strap is a sroch, masrichan. Provided that he does not tie the strap with which the saddle is fastened around the donkey's belly, and provided that he does not pass the strap under the animal's tail, shelo yifsholo ritzuat tachat znavo, because that would be a standard procedure when placing a burden on an animal. But he shouldn't do it so as to make it not a burden. Ba'amine Rav Asi bar Natan Rabbi Chia bar Rav Ashi. Rav Asi bar Natan raised a dilemma before Rabbi Chia bar Asi. He said, Mahu liten mardat al gabe chamor b'Shabbat. What's the halacha with placing a saddlecloth on a donkey on the Sabbath inside a private domain to warm the donkey? The saddlecloth was in order to provide the animal with warmth, and with no intention of taking it out into the public domain. So Rav Asi bar Natan said back to him, Amarle, mutar, he said it's permitted, you can do it. Amarle, v'kima ben zelu kaf. He said, so what's the difference between a saddle, mardat, which is to warm the animal, and an ukaf, which is a saddle? Rav Chia bar Asi was silent on the subject. He didn't answer him. Etive, ukaf she'al gebe chamor, lo yital telena biyado. Rabbi Isaac Bar Natan thought that Rabbi Chia was of the opinion that even a saddle may be placed on a donkey on Shabbat. He therefore raised an objection from a Breita. The Breita says a saddle that is on a donkey on Shabbat and its owner wishes to remove it, he may not move it with his hand. Ele molicha umivia bechatzer v'hu nofel me'elav. Rather, he walks the animal back and forth in the courtyard, and the saddle falls off on its own. Hashtali tol amrat lo lahaniach mibayeh. So now, even with regard to removing a saddle that is already on the animal's back, he said, no, you can't move it. Is prohibiting one from placing the saddle necessary to say? You said you can't. Said no, you can't move it. So obviously you can't even place it. Why do you need to say it? Amar le Rabbi Zera, shivakeh. Rabbi Zera said to Rav Asi, leave Rabbi Chia alone, don't bother him, stop nudging him, stop chaking his chinik. And because he agrees with his teacher. As the Rabbi Chia Barashi, Amarav, Tolin Taraskal Lebehema B'Shabbat. L'kal v'chomer l'mardat. Rav said that one may hang a basket with fodder around the neck of the animal on Shabbat, and by means of an a fortiori inference, derive that one may indeed place a saddlecloth on the animal's back on Shabbat. So what's the a fortiori inference? If X is true, then Y is all the more so true. So, kal v'chomer l'mardat, u'ma hatam mishum ta'anug shari, hacha mishum tsar lo kol shekin. So, the a fortiori inference is, just as they're placing a basket of fodder on it, so the animal can eat without bending down, which is for the animal's pleasure. Like he's got a basket tied to, the donkey has a basket tied to his mouth, he just has to eat, he doesn't have to bend down. What a great thing for that donkey. That's permitted, right? That's for pleasure. So here, placing the saddlecloth, which is done to prevent the animal from suffering in the cold, it should all the more so be permitted. Shmuel Amar Mardat Mutar Traskal Asor. Shmuel says no, a saddlecloth is permitted, however a basket with fodder in it is prohibited. So some commentaries suggest, such as that of Reb Elazar Moshe Horowitz, suggests that Rav permits hanging a basket of fodder around the neck of an animal on Shabbat. While this seems to contradict the Breita, he holds that cruelty to an animal is a Torah prohibition. You got to be kind to animals. The sages would not have issued a decree that would lead to a violation of a Torah prohibition. Therefore, he makes no distinction between causing an animal to suffer and withholding pleasure from the animal. They are both prohibited by Torah law. So, any questions? No questions? Okay. So Shmuel Amar Mardad Mutar Traskal Asor. Shmuel says saddlecloth permitted, basket prohibited. So Azal Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef Amra L'Shmarta D'Rav Kamei Shmuel. Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef said this whole law before Shmuel. Amar Le Yihachi Amar Abba Lo Yada B'Mile D'Shabta V'Lo Klum. So Shmuel said to him, if Abba, meaning Rav, actually said that, then he doesn't know anything about the laws of Shabbos. Kisalik Rabbi Zera Ashkechel Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet Yati V'Kabar La Shmarta Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Zera emigrated to the land of Israel. He found Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet, who sat and said to him in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Notnin Mardat Al Gabei Chamor B'Shabbat. One may place a saddlecloth on a donkey on Shabbat. Amarle Yishar. He said to him, very good, you spoke well. V'chein tirgama Aryoch Bavel. And Aryoch explained the matter likewise in Babylon. Now what's Aryoch? Aryoch? Yoich in Yiddish means soup, right? What's about Aryoch? No, I don't think it has to do with the Yiddish root. I don't think Yiddish had been invented yet. We're talking about Babylonia 2,000 years ago. So the nickname of Shmuel is Aryoich. It's never actually been fully explained. Shmuel, they used to give him a nickname, Aryoich. So Rashi explains that Aryoich, on the basis of a foreign language root, Richa, means king. Elsewhere he explains the etymology of Aryoich based on the verse, Judah is a lion's whelp, in Genesis 49. Aryeh. See, Aryeh. Just to illustrate Aryoich, here is an illustration of an Aryoich. Okay, there we go. So, anyhow, other commentaries explain that Aryoich is from the word Aryeh, like king of the beasts. So some commentaries state that Shmuel's appellation was after Aryoch, king of Alasar, mentioned in Genesis 14. The name is an allusion to the fact that on the one hand Shmuel was a great king, as the halacha is ruled in accordance with his opinion in all civil matters. But on the other hand, not in ritual matters. Al, Yasar, so al is like el, lo, al, negative, and ritual matters is asar. So al-asar is an acronym for al-asar, according to Rashi and Tosfos. Meaning, asar meaning prohibited, don't prohibit it like Shmuel in ritual matters. So several commentaries suggest that he was called this name because the Targum Yonatan states that Aryoch was as mighty as 13 people, and Shmuel expounded in 13 different yeshivas. Later commentaries sought a Persian root for this name. That calls for a l'chaim. L'chaim l'bracha. We continue. Aryoich Manu? Who is Aryoich, the Gemara asks. Shmuel. Like we just said, Shmuel is Aryoich. Vaha Rebbe Nami Amra. Didn't Rab also say that one may place a saddlecloth on a donkey in Shabbat? With regard to a saddlecloth, they agree. Elishama'e dahava mesayembe. Why then did Rebbe Zer attribute the ruling specifically to Shmuel? Rather, he heard Rebbe Binyamin Bar Yefet conclude ve'en tolin traskal b'Shabbat. However, one may not hang a basket with fodder in it around the neck of an animal. Amar le Yishar, he said, very well. V'kein tergema Aryoich b'Vavel. And likewise, they explained Aryoich like that in Babylon. So Aryoich Shmuel explained it in Babylon in the same way. V'kuli alman mihat mirdat mutar. In any case, everyone agrees that a saddlecloth is permitted. Ma'ishna me'okaf, so how is it different from a saddle? The saddlecloth permitted. Why not a saddle? Shiny hatam de'efshar denafil mimele. It's different because a saddle could fall on its own. Therefore, there's no reason to permit its removal by hand. The saddle will fall anyway, so why permit it to be removed by hand? Rav Papa Amar, Kan l'chamama, kan l'tzanana. Rav Papa said there's a distinction between the two cases. Here, when the sages permitted placing a saddlecloth on a donkey in Shabbat, it was in order to warm the animal. There, where the sages prohibited removing a saddle, it was in order to cool the animal. Placing the saddlecloth to warm it, l'chamama, ich latzara. That would is permitted because otherwise the animal would experience discomfort if you don't do it. L'tzanana leit letzara. However, removing the saddle to cool the animal is prohibited because the animal does not experience discomfort from excessive heat. You might argue that either way, but that's what it says here. That's like people say in the well-worn folk saying that's on everybody's lips 2,000 years ago in Babylonia, Chamra afilu bitkufat tamuz karirala. So back then, everybody used to say, so you could argue, animals do suffer from excessive heat in our day. We're talking about another generation, 20, 30 generations ago, however long ago, and maybe 40 generations, 20 generations, it's 20 times 10 would be 200, 80 generations ago, there was a well-known saying, and it went like this, Chamra afilu bitkufat tamuz karirala. A donkey, even in the summer season of Tammuz, when it's very hot out, it is cold. The donkey is still cold, therefore seeing to the animal's warmth is more important. Meitive, lo yitzeh sus b'zanav shu'al. The Gemara raises an objection from the Tosefta to those who prohibit placing a basket with fodder around an animal's neck on Shabbat. Lo yitzeh, so the Tosefta says the following: Lo yitzeh sus b'zanav shu'al, v'lo b'zaharurit sheben enav. V'lo yitzeh hazav b'kis shelo, v'lo izim b'kis shebedaden, v'lo para b'chasom shebefia, v'lo seyachim b'traskalin shebefihem l'reshut harabim, v'lo behema b'sandal sheberaglea, v'lo b'kamea af alpi shehu mumche, zo chomer b'behema meba'adam. So that whole Tosefta goes like this. A horse may neither go out in the public domain on Shabbat with a foxtail that is placed as a talisman to ward off the evil eye, nor with a string of red wool that is hung between its eyes as an ornament. So the foxtail was the segula, and the red string was just simply an ornament. Unlike today, where for some reason unknown to me, red strings have become some kind of magical way to ward off the evil eye. Anyhow, the Tosefta continues, neither may a zav, a man who has experienced a gonorrheal emission, go out with his pouch to prevent his clothes from becoming sullied from his emissions, nor goats go out with a pouch that is on their udders, so they will not be scratched by the stones as they walk along, nor a cow with a muzzle on its mouth, nor foals with baskets of fodder that are around their mouths in the public domain. An animal excuse me. An animal may neither go out with metal shoes that are on its feet, nor with an amulet that is placed on the animal to promote its good health, even if the amulet has been proved effective, like the kinds Bugs writes over here. And this is a stricture that applies to animals beyond the strictures that apply to people, as a person is permitted to go out in the public domain with an amulet that has been proven effective. So if you happen to have an effective amulet, you can walk around with it on Shabbos. However, an animal may go out with a bandage that is on a wound. Or with splints that are on a broken bone, so his bone will heal properly. And with the afterbirth hanging from its womb. Please don't learn this while eating dinner. And one may plug the bell hanging from an animal's neck to prevent it from ringing, and then the animal may walk in the courtyard, which is the private domain, but not in a public domain. Katani mihat, in any case, it is taught here, lo seyachim b'traskalim shebefiyem b'reshut rabim, nor foals with baskets of fodder that are around their mouths into the public domain. By inference, it is specifically into the public domain. L'reshut rabim hu delo. In the public domain, they may not go with fodder baskets on their mouths. Ha bechatzer shaper dami. However, in a courtyard, in a private domain, it's perfectly okay. My love, bigdolim mishum ta'anug. What? Is it not referring to large foals around whose necks fodder baskets are hung for their pleasure? Lo, the Gemara says no. Biktanim umishum tsar. Daikanami diktani. No, the Gemara answers no. It is referring to small foals, and baskets are hung to prevent their discomfort. The legs of the young foal are long and its neck is short. Consequently, eating from the ground is difficult. Hanging the fodder basket around its neck enables it to eat without bending down. So the Gemara adds, this is also precise in the language of the Tosefta, as it teaches in the case of the foals, dumya de kamea shmamina, that the foals, it's similar to the case of an amulet worn for healing purposes. So the Gemara concludes, indeed, learn from it that it is the correct understanding that what? And the halacha is that one may, in the Shulchan Aruch it says that one may hang a fodder basket around the neck of a foal that suffers when forced to eat from the ground. However, one may not take the foal with the basket into the public domain. The Gemara continues, Amar ma, lo b'kamir af al pi shehu mumche. The master said, nor may an animal go out with an amulet on Shabbat, even if the amulet is proved effective. V'ha'anatanan, v'lo b'kamir she'enu mumche. The Gemara asks, didn't we learn in the Mishnah one may not go out with on Shabbat with an amulet that has not been proved effective? So by inference, ha-mumche shapir dami, that if it is proven effective, then it's okay to go out with it on Shabbos into the public domain. Ha-chanami she'enu mumche. So the Gemara answers here too, it's also referring to an amulet that has not been proved effective. The Gemara asks, doesn't the Braita teach even if the amulet has been proven effective? So the Gemara answers, the Braita is referring to an amulet that has been proven effective. It's been effective for an animal, but not effective for a person. So the Gemara wonders, is there an amulet that's proven effective for a person, it's not proven effective for an animal? Yes, there is. Adam de'itle mazala. Healing an animal should be easier than healing a person. So the Gemara says, yes, an animal aids a person who is under the protection of an advocate angel. It heals a person who has good mazal. However, Messiah behemoth. Okay, again, Adam de'ite mazala Messiah. It'll help a person with good mazal, but an amulet for an animal, behemoth de'leitla mazala. An animal doesn't have a mazal like a human being. Lo Messiah, it doesn't help. Whether or not a human has a mazal or an angel and an animal doesn't requires further study. That's according to this opinion of the Gemara. There may be other opinions. Ihachi. My ze chomer b'behema me'ba'adam misvarak akameakai asandalkai. So the Gemara proposes a question. If so, that the Braita is referring to an amulet that did not prove effective for an animal, but if the amulet proved effective, the animal may indeed go out with it into the public domain. So if that's true, what is the meaning of the phrase in the Tosefta? And this is the stricture that applies to animals beyond the strictures that apply to people. The halacha is the same with regard both to people and animals. If the amulet is proven effective, even an animal may go out with it on Shabbat. If it is not proven effective, even a person may not go out with it. So the Gemara responds and says, do you hold that this statement is referring to an amulet? No, it is referring to a shoe. An animal may not go out with a shoe on Shabbat, but a person may. Tashma, sachin u mefarkasin la'adam ve'en sachin u mefarkasin la'behema. With regard to whether and to what extent the discomfort of animals is a factor taken into consideration on Shabbat, the Gemara says, come in here, that we just taught in the Braita, one may smear on oil and scrape off a scab on Shabbat for a person, and one may not smear on oil and scrape off a scab for an animal. My love to Ika Maka, Mishum Tsar, Lo, Digamar Maka, Mishum Ta'anu. Is this not referring to a case where there is a wound, and he smears the oil and scrapes off the scab due to the discomfort caused by the wound, and nevertheless it was permitted exclusively for a person and not an animal? The Gemara rejects this argument. It says, no. It's referring to a case where the wound had already ceased and healed, and he smears oil and scrapes on it due to the pleasure caused by the treatment. Tashma. Behema shechazadam en ma'amidin ota b'mayim b'shvil shetitzdanen. The Gemara cites an additional proof, come in here, that which taught in the following Braita, with regard to an animal suffering from a heart congestion that restricts the blood supply, and whose temperature is risen, one may not stand it in water so it cools off. However, with regard to a person suffering from heart congestion that restricts his blood supply, one may stand him in cool water so he cools off. אדם שאוחז דם, מעמידין אותו במים בשביל שיצטנן. Amar Ula Gerzera Mishum Shchikat Samamanim. Ula said here, the sages issued a decree prohibiting all healing on Shabbat due to the crushing of herbs for medicinal purposes, which is prohibited by Torah law. The sages prohibited cooling the animal in water lest one come to grind the ingredients used in the preparation of medicines. So in terms of the practical halacha, Shulchan Aruch and Rambam say one may smear on oil and scrape off the scab off a person's body on Shabbat, even if it is only for pleasure, and leaving the scab would not cause pain. You can check that in Sefer Zmanim, Hilchot Shabbat 21, Halacha 30, and Shulchan Aruch, or Chaim Shin Chaf Chet, Sif Katan Chaf Bet. So, Ihachi Adam Nami. If so, the same decree should also apply for a person. Adam Nire Kemeker. So it should apply to a person that it should also be prohibited to stand a sick person in water to cool them off due to the rabbinic prohibition of healing on Shabbat. So the Gemara answers, in the case of a person, it appears as if he entered the water merely to cool off and not necessarily to cool an illness. So the question, we're talking clearly about a chole she'en bo sakana. We're talking about a sick person on Shabbat who is not in mortal danger. Because when a person is in mortal danger, of course, we do suspend the law and we allow him to do the healing. You violate one Sabbath in order that you may keep many more Sabbaths. So, so the Gemara says, wait a second. If the person just looks like he's going to cool off, then an animal also looks like he's just going to cool off. An animal, the Gemara answers, Ein mekar lebehema. With animals it's different. An animal does not typically enter the water on its own to cool off. This may also be disputed. Neither does one typically stand an animal in water to cool it off unless it's serving some healing purpose. You don't just willy-nilly drag your donkey into the water. Right? Apparently, due to a decree, the sages were stringent and prohibited standing an animal in water, even if it will die as a result. That's called cooling off. The Gemara asks, do we really issue a decree like this for an animal? Some authorities explain this question as follows. Such as Rabbi Elazar Moshe Horowitz says the following. The question is this. Is it prohibited to cause an animal to perform an action that one is prohibited to do so by rabbinic decree? The fact that proof is cited from the halachot of the Shabbat limits a rabbinic prohibition to the halachot of crushing herbs, which is prohibited by Torah law, is not difficult as with regards to animals. There are instances where the sages are more stringent with regard to rabbinic decrees than they are with Torah prohibitions. That's Rabbi Yehuda Bachrach. So do we really issue the decree for an animal? The Gemara says, "V'hatanya hayta omedet chutz l'tchum korela v'hiba lo gazrinan zil ma'ate latui." So wasn't it taught in the Braita that if an animal were standing beyond the Shabbat limit, a situation which is prohibited to go fetch it, then he may call the animal and it will come on its own? Here boy, here Rex, come on Rex, come back. And it comes on its own, right? And we do not issue a decree to prohibit calling the animal, lest he come to bring him himself. Apparently the sages did not issue a decree in a case where one could incur a loss and there is no actual transgression committed. Here too, it should not be prohibited to stand his animal in water due to a decree, lest he come to grind herbs in the further healing of the animal, and therefore violate a Torah prohibition. Amar Ravina, kagon shahayat tchum shala muvla l'tok tchum shalo. Ravina said no proof can be cited from this case, as here is a situation where the animal's Shabbat limit were subsumed within the limit of its owner. The animal strayed beyond its own Shabbat limit, which is determined by the Shabbat limit of the shepherd entrusted with herding the animal. However, the animal remains within the Shabbat limit of its owner, which extended beyond the limit of the shepherd. So consequently, the owner is permitted to call the animal so it returns on its own. Even if he forgets and goes to fetch the animal, he will not have to go beyond his Shabbat limit. The fact that the animal went by itself beyond the Shabbat limit is of no concern. So, the Rashash says the following. By rabbinic decree, and some say by Torah law, each person has a Shabbat limit beyond the city limits within which he's permitted to walk on Shabbat. So even animals and inanimate objects have a limit determined by the limit of the person in whose care the animals are entrusted, and beyond which these animals cannot be taken. In the case discussed here, there is a place that was beyond the animal's Shabbat limit and within the owner's Shabbat limit. Therefore, the owner is permitted to call the animal to come back to him. These are overlapping Shabbat limits. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, Shchikat Samamanim Gufet Tanai. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, the matter of the decree due to crushing herbs is itself subject to a dispute between the Tanaim. So here's the dispute of the Tanaim. Shchikat samamanim gufa Tanaihi, the Tanya behema she'achla karshinin lo yiritzena bechatzer bishvil shetitrapeh. V'Rebbe Oshaya matir. Darash Rava halacha k'Rebbe Oshaya. The Braita says, in the case of an animal that ate vetch. Yochi, you ever eat vetch?
Only on Sundays.
Oh, vetch. Good old vetch. A vetch, what is another word for vetch? Karshinin. Karshinin is called vetch. So in the case where an animal that ate vetch, which could cause a life-threatening case of constipation, one may not run it around in the courtyard to loosen its bowels due to the decree prohibiting healing. Rabbi Yoshaya deemed it permitted. Apparently, the Tanaim disagreed whether or not healing is prohibited with regard to animals on Shabbat.
Nah.
So the Gemara adds that Rava taught the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yoshaya, who says that you just turned my camera down and nobody can see my silly face. Please raise the camera. There we go. Up, 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 up. A little down. Good. Perfect. There we go. Don't touch it again or I'm going to have to get mad. Okay, anyhow. So Rabbi Yoshaya was kind to animals. He said you can heal animals on Shabbos. And Rava agreed with him. And the halacha is, the practical law, the way we follow it today, is it going to be kind to the animal or not? Let's find out. An animal that ate a large amount of vetch, a climbing plant from the legume family, and is now suffering, it's permitted to run it around the courtyard to loosen its bowels. There's no room for concern that thereby you're violating rabbinic decree prohibiting healing activities on Shabbat. So, amama, as we say in Boston, amama. And I heard that from my Rebbe, Reb Tversky, of blessed memory, the Talmud Rebbe of Boston. He did not say amar mar, he said amah ma. The master said, Lo yetze hazav bekis shelo v'lo izim bekis shebedadem. V'hatanya yotzet izim bekis shebedadem. So we have a contradiction here. The master said, neither may a zav go out with his pouch, which prevents his clothes from being soiled by his emissions, nor goats with the pouch that is on their udders. The Gemara asks, wasn't it taught in a different Braita that goats may go out with a pouch on their udders? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, lo kashya, hada mihadak, ha de lo mihadak. Rabbi Yehuda said it's not a difficulty. This braita is referring to a pouch that is tied tightly under the udder. It is permitted because there's no concern that the pouch will fall. And that braita about the zav is referring to it's not very tightly tied, because it would be rather uncomfortable for the gonorrheal sufferer to have a tightly tied pouch around his genitalia. That was gratuitous. Okay, it is prohibited with the zav because of concern that the pouch will fall and the person will come to retrieve it while walking down the street. Rav Yosef Amar, Tanai Shaklat Me'alma. Tanai Shaklat Me'alma? Have you removed the Tanaim from the world? This is subject to a disagreement between the Tanaim. Tanaihi, the Tanan Ha'izim Yotzot Tzurut. The Tanaim said, she-goats may go out with their udders bound. Rabbi Yossi oser b'kulan chutz min harachelot hakuvunot. Rabbi Yossi prohibits the animal going out with all of these items as he considers them burdens except for ewes that are kuvunot. Kuvunot. We'll see what that means in 1 second. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Izim yotzet tzurot liabesh v'lo lechalev. Rabbi Yehuda says goats may go out on Shabbat with their udders bound to dry their milk supply and discontinue their lactation in order to facilitate conception, as in that case they are tied with the tight permanent knot. There's no fear that they'd come off. However, they may not go out with their outer udders bound to conserve the milk, because in that case they're bound loosely. Apparently, there are Tanaim who rule leniently with regard to attaching pouches to the udders of goats and permit the practice, and others prohibit doing so. The Ibayet Ema, Havaha Rabbi Yehuda. Some say that these braitas are both in accordance with the method of Rabbi Yehuda. Lo kasha, kan liabesh, kan lechalev. There's not a difficulty here where the goats are permitted to go out with a pouch under their udders. The braita is referring to a case where it's to dry their milk. There, where the goats are prohibited from the pouches, the braita is talking about a case where to conserve their milk. Tanya Amar Rabbi Yehuda Maase beizim bet antochia shahayu dadehen gasim va'asulahen kitzin kadei shelo yisartu dadehen. It was taught in the braita that Rabbi Yehuda said there was an incident involving a goats belonging to the residents of a house in Antioch, whose udders were especially large and they would drag along the ground. So they made pouches for them so their udders would not get scratched. Tanu Rabbanan Maseh Bechad she meta ishto vehenicha ben linok. The Gemara relates a braita where the sages taught there's an incident where one's man's wife died and she left him a son to nurse, and he didn't have any money to pay the wages of a wet nurse. Find another woman who's lactating and nursing, and then the baby would survive, and she could be the wet nurse for the baby. You understood. ולא היה לו שכר מנקה ליתן. נעשה לו נס ונפתחו לו דדים כשתי דדי אישה והניק את בנו. A miracle occurred, and this man started lactating from his own male nipples. אמר רב יוסף, בואו ראה כמה גדול אדם זה שנעשה לו נס כזה. Rav Yosef said, come and see how great this man was who had such a miracle performed for him. Amar le Abaye, Adarabba, kama garua adam ze shenatnu lo sidre v'reshit, shenishtanu lo sidre v'reshit. Abaye said, no, and it's not that he was such a great man. What a poor guy! It's so horrible that God had to change the order of creation to save this poor wretch. Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda, Bore kama kashen mezonotav shel adam. Rav Yehuda added, said, come see how difficult it is to provide for a person's sustenance. Shenitnu alav sidre breshit. It is so difficult that the order of creation has to be altered on his behalf, which apparently it's easier to change the order of creation than to provide him with a ready source of financial support. Amar Rav Nachman teda shemitrachesh nisa v'lo ivru mezone. Rav Nachman said, know that it is so, that miracles are often performed on one's behalf. However, it has not yet happened that food was miraculously created in a person's home. So the Gemara relates another unusual story. Tanu Rabbanan Maseh ba'adam echad she'nasa isha gidemet v'lo hikir ba od ad yom mota. The sages taught there was an incident involving a man who married a one-armed woman, and he didn't realize that she was one-armed until the day she died. Amar Rav, bor kamet snua ishazo. Rav said, see how modest this woman was. Shelo hikir ba ba'ala. She was so modest that her husband didn't realize this about her. She kept covered all the time. Amar lo Rabbi Chia, zo darka bakach. Ele kamet snua adam ze, shelo hikir b'ishto. Rabbi Chia said, this is the typical conduct of a woman to be modern. Come and see how modest this man was. He didn't recognize this in it that his wife only had one arm. Anything interesting to say about this? Not really. V'karim yotzin levuvin. We learn in a Mishnah that rams may go out levuvin. My levuvin. What is this word levuvin that we started out with? Amar Rav Huna, tutri. Oh, tutri. That helps. Rav Huna said they're tied, or tutri, tied in pairs. That comes from perhaps connected to the Persian word tatura. Tatura meaning ropes placed on the legs of horses. So they're tied in pairs. My mashma dahai levuvin lishna dekrovehu. The Gemara, so the Gemara explains, from where may it be inferred that this word levuvim is a term of closeness? Diktiv, libavtini achoti kala. It says in the Song of Songs, chapter 4, libavtini achoti kala, you have drawn me near, libavtini, my sister, my bride. Ula amar, or shekoshrin lehem keneged libam kedei shelo yiplu aleim ze'evim. Ula says, Levunin refers to animal hide that one ties over the hearts, or the lev, levuvin, lev, heart of rams. So it's hide that's tied over the hearts of rams, so the wolves will not attack them. Ze'evim achsarim nafli. Ze'evim azcharim nafli. Anekevod lo nafli. Do wolves attack rams and not attack ewes? Mishum de masku beresh edra, uze'evim beresh edra nafli. The sof edra lo nafli. It said the Gemara answers because the males rams walk in the head of the flock, in front. So the Gemara asks, do wolves attack the head of the flock? Don't they rather attack the rear of the flock? Ela mishum de shamni. No, it's because of the fat ones. The fat ones are they prey on the rams because the rams, the males, are plump. Wait a second, the Gemara asks, and the females, the ewes, aren't plump and fat? The Gemara, so furthermore, furthermore, do the wolves know how to distinguish between the plump ones and the thin ones? Rather, the wolves prey specifically on the rams because they raise their nose and walk while looking on both sides. The wolves think that they are preparing to attack them. So, according to variant readings, some explain that the rams walk like wolves, or that some explain that rams walk like wolves or bears in a very conspicuous manner, looking to both sides. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak amar or shekoshrin lehen tachat zachrutan kedei shelo ya'alu al nekevot. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says that the levunin mentioned in the Mishnah, it's referring to animal hide that one ties under the male organ so they won't mount the females. Mimai the Ketani Sefer v'Rachelim Yotzot Shchuzot. So, and from where do we derive that this is the meaning, that it's tying the male so they won't procreate? Because the next part of the Mishnah says, use meguat shechuzot. My shechuzot, what's shechuzot mean? She'ochazin ha'aliyah she'aleyan lamala kadei she'alu aleyan zcharim. Shechuzot means that they fasten. She'ochazin, it sounds like shechuzot, the Hebrew she'ochazin, they fasten their tails with animal hides so the males may mount them more easily. So sometimes the shepherds would tie up the female tails so the males could procreate more easily. Reisha kadei shelo yalu al nekevot. The first one is, the beginning, when it talks about levunin, it's talking about tying the organ of the male so they won't be able to procreate, at times when the shepherds do not want them to procreate. And shechuzin is talking about when they're tying up the females. So, Seifa kadei shelo yalu aleim zacharim, in the latter clause, it's so the males will not mount them. My mashma dahai shechuzot, from where may it be inferred that this word shechuzot is a term of exposure? The Gemara answers, shechuz lishna de geluyihu, diktiv behine isha likrato shit zona v'netzurat lev. Because we have a verse that we learn shechuzot is a term of exposure. It's the description of a wicked woman, and behold, there he met a woman with the attire of a harlot. Shit zona. We look it up in Proverbs chapter 7, you'll see shechuzot can be interpreted as an acronym of the word shit zona, attire of a harlot, where the letters taf and chet, which are similar in form, interchanged.